Okay, today we will take a look at the sentence, the enemy of an enemy is a friend. We will mathematically analyze the sentence. Now let's get right into it. We will take that as an axiom. The enemy of an enemy of X is always a friend of X. It doesn't really matter which friend. And we also need that the relationship between two people is either friend or enemy. So the relationship between two people means that no one, I can say he's my friend, but he would say I'm his enemy. That doesn't work. And we can say, yeah, we're neutral. We are either friends or enemies. Okay.
Jim is my enemy, but it turns out that Jim is also his own worst enemy. And the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So Jim is actually my friend. But because he is his own worst enemy, the enemy of my friend is my enemy. So actually Jim is my enemy. But
now, as you saw from this clip, there is a problem if a person is an enemy with themselves. Let's see why. Okay, we will assume that A is an enemy of A. We will get that A is an enemy of A if we substitute an enemy of A for A. And therefore we get through our first axiom that the friend of A is A. And since a friend is not an enemy, we get a not enemy of an enemy. A not enemy of A is an enemy of A, which clearly is a contradiction. So we assume that A is a friend of A and we get reflexivity. Let's just call it like that for now. Now, let's construct just something and look what we can find. Now we can see that if we have a friend of an enemy of A, that is pretty much the same as saying an enemy of a friend of A. Obviously, it matters which path we take, but if we, for example, take the path A, B, and C, we get an enemy of a friend is the same as a friend of an enemy from the perspective of C, and that's just A. Obviously, there could be more people, but the equal sign just means that the relationship is the same. Okay. Now let's assume a friend of a friend is an enemy. Yes. Let's see what we get if we assume that. We can just draw this triangle and we can draw another triangle through the same rule with a new person D. And now through our assumption we get a friend of a friend is an enemy and we get an enemy of an enemy is a friend for this one. So D and B must be friends because C is an enemy of B and D is an enemy of C. So through our first axiom we get this two must be friends. But through our assumption we get that A and B are friends and A and D are friends. So they must be enemies. So we get a contradiction. And we can conclude that a friend of a friend must not be an enemy. And that just means a friend of A is just a friend of A. And let's call this transitivity. Now we have everything to form equivalence classes. What is an equivalence class? It's basically a friend group. It's the people who are befriended with each other. Now let's define the equivalence class of the friend group of A, where exactly every friend of A is the element of the friend group A. So we can conclude that A is always an element of the friend group of A, since A is always befriended with A. And every element of the friend group of A is friend with each other element of friend group of the friend group of A, because a friend of a friend is always a friend. And we can always take, for example, this is A, we can, instead of saying this is a friend and this is a friend, we can conclude that this must be a friend through our rule. Also, every element of the friend group of A is an enemy with every other element who's not in the friend group, because if they were befriended, for example, they must be in the same friend group. Yes. Okay. Now let's take one representative of each and every group and make a new class called the friend group representatives, which with one of them. This is allowed by the axiom of choice, but you don't need to know what this actually says. Now let's take these two people, for example, and this is our friend group. Now we can conclude that every element of the friend group representative group is enemy with every other element of the friend group representative group, because if they were friends, they would be in the same friend group. But if you have a friend group representative group with the elements A, D, and G, we would get an enemy of A is D and an enemy of D is G, where we can substitute something, and we get an enemy of A is just G, and through the first axiom we get that a friend of A is actually G, and since a friend of A and G, since A and G are friends, we can say that G can't be an element of the friend group representative, since it is a friend group in the friend group A. Now we can get that the friend group representatives, the number of elements must be lesser or equal to 2 or less than 3, and this just means that there are at max 2 friend groups. Now let's look how the meaning has shifted from our original axiom. In the beginning we had an enemy of X is just a friend of X, but now we can see that it actually means that A is an enemy with B and is an enemy of C, and we just always switch 2 times the friend groups, and since there are only 2, we must be at the same friend group again. So this is a nice new understanding we got. Now let's look at what we will do for the next episode. We will reinvent the concept of friendship and give it a new meaning. We will define the communication planes and maybe infinitely more planes, which will include infinite dimensional space, which is pretty funny. How to act like friends, and why you should not invite 2 friends who hate each other, which is a friend of a friend is an enemy, basically. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe.